They had a narrative from the very early days, and one of the things you find from the mass media is that once they get their story, they just tend to stick with it. And a lot of this comes down to careers. Like within the journalism profession, what they do is they look at the high end publications where they eventually want to work someday, where they want to land. Like if you start off as a local crime reporter, well, you start off in the obituary page. You want to get promoted to the crime reporter, right? And and then you want to go to a regional newspaper. Then you want to go to a national newspaper, and so on. So everybody looks to the highest, most prestige journalistic outfits in the world and says, "Okay, I want to write things that are just like they write." And if you write something wrong as a journalist, this is true. You write a wrong story, you could lose your whole career for the rest of your life. So these people are really risk averse, so they tend to take their cues from the highest levels. And I knew we were in trouble on February 27th when the New York Times, instead of doing what they've always done in the presence of pathogens in the course of the 20th century, which is to calm everybody down, encourage people if they get sick to go see the doctor, otherwise go about their normal business, which is what the New York Times told us to do in 2006 and in 2002 and 2003, and then also in 1968, 69, 57, 58, and all the way back to the 1940s when we dealt, early 1940s when we dealt with the polio epidemic. The New York Times is recommending calm and normal social function. It's like responsible public health advice. This year was completely different. On February 27th, the New York Times did a podcast with Donald McNeil, their science reporter who has absolutely no background in science whatsoever. He has a degree in rhetoric from Berkeley. Predicted on this show, he said, unless we all just drop in place and isolate and live in our homes for months, there will be 6.6 million deaths in this country. That's what he said. And I'm it's first thing in the morning, I'm listening to the New York Times podcast, and I thought, you know what? This podcast just sent out a message to the entire American media that it's time to panic and that we're going to panic as long as possible. And it was about at that point that I started turning it off because I thought I can't learn anything from these people at this point. It just got stuck in their heads. Now, there could have been a political motivation, I think there certainly was. There's like, let's get Trump, let's whip up a disease frenzy and then everybody will blame Trump for it. I think that might have been a factor here. But there's other deeper reasons too. One has to do with the fact that the modelers have become the modelers and these social distancing disease mitigators. They're not doctors. They're, for the most part, computer scientists. Have developed over the last 15 years an inordinate influence within the epidemiological professions, and they've been preparing for the next pandemic for a very long time. So the New York Times is talking to a lot of these guys that are out there, and they're still out there. But there's a lot of disagreements out there. The New York Times also ran in the second week of March an article by David Katz, who's an infectious disease expert. And he said, "Look, the worst thing we can do is lockdown. It's going to the cure will be worse than disease, and the best thing you do right now is live your normal life, risk getting COVID, and contribute to herd immunity. Is get back to normal as soon as possible." That's what he wrote. So the New York Times ran that, but that was the exception. For the most part, they've been contacting these lockdown crazy people like Neil Ferguson and London. There's many of these people in the United States, and they somehow believe that they can manage the disease implausibly and without any evidence. They think they could try this incredible experiment. The other thing is that the media is all the overclass, right? The blue check mark people who actually don't bear the burden and would rather not take the risk of getting the disease. So they're writing articles from their living rooms and puffy house slippers and enjoying their new lives and pretty happy with it. A lot of eyeballs, everybody's reading the press now, so there's a sense in which the media has benefited from this thing. I mean, look at the New York Times stock price. I mean, it's through the roof. So it's kind of, I don't think there's one reason why things have been so bad. There's just been a lot of reasons, but at the same time, I don't think that we're going to get through the rest of this year with this crazy narrative that lockdowns work in place because the science is too clear. The truth is getting out there. I noticed, I've been anti-lockdown since January, right? I've been writing about this topic the whole time. But it was a lonely struggle in March and April, and then it started growing and growing and growing. Now, there's giant lockdown movements, anti-lockdown movements all over the world, In the United States, certainly, even though we're not out in the streets for whatever reason, I don't know why. But, the street protests in Spain, Italy, and Germany, and even in Denmark, where they reversed a wicked law. And things are growing in Ireland, too. I don't know if you saw we published this morning at the American Institute for Economic Research a beautiful report signed by something like 60 scientists and doctors as prepared in Ireland about the disaster of lockdowns. And that didn't get a lot of attention, but I'm giving it more attention this morning by publishing it on our website. So we're breaking through gradually.